All right, guys. I wanted to talk to you a little bit today about CDIs. The bike that's in front of you is a 1987 Honda Rebel 250, or the CMX 250. This was another bike that somebody else had started. And we're doing a full build on this thing here, so we'll talk a little bit, a little bit more about that. I'm just kind of starting to get it together a little bit. It was a basket case. I mean, it was just a pile of parts and a frame. Somebody had hardtailed it, but did the cheap version where they just put a bar right here and get rid of delete the shocks. There's a full sissy bar type seat that went all the way back, or kind of a king and queen seat. The engine wasn't in it. It was a million pieces. There's a couple different tanks for it. There were no handlebars for it, but we'll do a video on that. But what we're doing today, and what I had come across, a couple different things on this bike. Number one, they didn't have basically no electrical with it. It came with a set of coils and a CDI, and that was it. There was basically no wiring harness, no electrics in it, and stuff like that. I know that would scare a lot of folks, but it's really not that complicated. Honda's great. I know a lot of the manufacturers, it really works for any of the manufacturers, but it's really, once you get into the CDIs with a pulse generator and stuff, it's really simple. There's just not much to it. The thing about this one is, and you can't find the CDI for this bike anymore, and the reason for it is because the CDI itself, typically, on let's say like a single cylinder dirt bike, you're going to have one wire coming out of the CDI that feeds your coils. It gives power to your coils. Well, this one actually has two wires coming out of it to feed your coils, and they just don't make that. They just do not make that CDI anymore. This is the first generation Rebel 250. The second generation Rebel 250 has the single wire CDI, which just about every bike that's uses a CDI, whether or not it has two cylinders or one, are going to have the single wire. These type of engines are referred to as lost spark. So yes, you have two coils, but both coils fire at the same time all the time. Whether or not that one of the cylinders is on its compression stroke or its exhaust stroke, it fires at the same time. So that's kind of what they refer to as a lost spark, because you're not really, obviously you're not sparking compressed gas. So you don't need the two wire CDI. You just need the single wire CDI. And we're going to bring you over to the bench, and I'll kind of show you some of the CDIs. The CDI that's on it right now is the second generation CDI. I did have a problem with this bike, and that's another thing we can go over. I had a problem with this bike because it wouldn't spark. And you go through all your checks and stuff like that, and it's nice to have the manual because it does give you your checks. Some of them have the dynamic testing where it actually tells you the voltage that you should be getting out of your coil, out of your stator or your pulse generator, and then others do they give you just resistance. Well, this book gave me voltages, and our coil voltage out of our stator was too low. It was only about 72 volts, 74 volts, and it needed to be over 100 volts. Your pulse generator should be at like 0.7 volts or higher. I mean, if it's crazy high, it's not going to be good, but if you're getting 0.3 volts out of it, or 300 millivolts or 700, you want anything over 700 millivolts, and anything close to it. I mean, if it's like 6,700 or something like that, it might just be your meter that's not reading it right. But so anyway, we just didn't have any power out of it, and I wanted to give a good workaround, and that's what this is kind of a hack for. So in a pinch, if your stator goes bad but you still have a good pulse generator, we can put a basic Chinese dirt bike CDI on this thing that will make it work. And that's what I'm going to show you. So, hold on. All right. So these are some basic CDIs that you are going to find on just about any Chinese ATV, motorcycle, you know, buggy, any kind of thing like that. Now, you're also going to find these CDIs on, you know, a lot of Hondas and Kawasaki's and all that kind of stuff. You know, they're kind of universal in that regard. You know, they all kind of look the same. Now, an easy way to tell the difference between them, and I mean, you can obviously see some obvious differences. You know, the style of the plug, you know, their physical size, and that's pretty much the tell. So, like this one here is out of a, I think that was out of an 84 or an 85 ATC Honda 200X. If you can find one of these, if you find one of these round plugs, granted you need the harness, you know, the little pigtail that comes out of the thing. If you can find that, if it's just the wiring harness, snag it, because these little guys are great. They got a lot of power. The thing about this though, and you can see the physical size of these two right here, comparatively, both of these are AC CDIs, okay? The thing about it is though, is that they do not, actually I think this one's, hold on. I think this one, I'd have to check real quick, but that might actually be a DC. But the difference in size between these do not have an advance built into them. They are meant to run with a bike that has a mechanical advance in it. You know what I'm talking about? On a lot of those mid-80s Hondas, there's actually an advancer in the top of the head that spins around and advances your spark as the engine goes. So if it's really small like this, it does not have any advance in it. So if you put it on an engine that, you know, doesn't have a mechanical advance built into it, it's going to idle, but as soon as you rev it up, your RPMs are going to be all weird, and it's not going to fire right, and it's not going to run right. So now any of your square plug like this, if you want to know whether or not it's AC or DC, is count the pins in here. If it's got 5 pins, it's an AC CDI, okay? If it's got 4 pins, it's a DC, okay? And then of course you've got this, which is a 6-pin, okay? But now this is a 6-pin AC CDI, and you can just see by the physical size of it. Now, this one has mechanical advance built into it. That's why it's slightly larger than the ones that don't have the mechanical advance in it, okay? Now there's not much of a difference between the square plug, you know, 5-pin and the square plug 6-pin. It's just, for whatever reason, the internal workings of the CDI has an extra ground wire that comes out of it for the AC version, and there's just, yeah. I don't know why. It has something to do with what's in here. I don't know why there's that extra ground wire, but there just is. Now we come to this one, which I gotta check real quick. Okay, and that's why it is even a little bit bigger. So now this also has a mechanical advance in it, but it's the DC version, and it has 4 pins. Okay. Now this is the DC. This is the DC 6-pin, 6-pin round plug version, and it's even bigger for whatever reason. When they get this big, this one here was supposed to be for an XR600, and it was the wrong one, because the XR600 is an AC fired system, and this is a DC thing. But it'll still fit anything that's a DC powered that has this, you know, this plug here. That's what it's going to be good, you know, it'll be good for if it's a DC system. A lot of your Chinese buggies, the GY6 stuff, the 150s and the 250s all have this DC stuff. But that's the beauty of it, like we were just talking about before, and we'll use this, because these square plug ones, much easier to use and to pin, and to use the pins, you know, If you've got a bike like this one, like this Rebel has, with a bad stator in it, right? You can buy this square plug DC CDI with the little pigtail that comes out like this. And that's what you would want. And it's extremely simple. So if your stator goes bad, the only wire that you need from your bike to get it to fire is this blue and white wire right here. And that is the signal from your pulse generator, okay? When you need this, and you need power, which is this black and red. But this is all you need from the bike, is this pulse generator, and that tells the CDI when to fire. So basically, I mean, it's extremely simple, okay? This is your pulse generator, which is your blue and white, okay? You hook that up. This is your ground wire. The CDI has to have a good ground. So you hook this up to ground. Then this right here, this black and red wire, would be hooked to 12 volts, okay? And typically on this bike here, if I had to do it, what I would do is I would just sneak a wire from my ignition switch, from my key switch that turns power onto your accessories, and just sneak a wire from, splice that into there and run it to there. Now, every time I turn the key on, it gives power to your CDI, and then when you either kickstart the bike or turn the starter over, it gives the signal for the bike to fire, and then it brings us to this here goes to your coils. Whether or not you've got one coil or two coils, this wire will go to both of those coil wires, and it is the black with the yellow stripe, and boom, bike's gonna fire, it's gonna run. That's where you're gonna get your spark. Now, the black and white wire, okay, which is not used when you're using the DC 4 pin, you do not need this black and white wire because it's a kill wire. It actually, if you were to look in here, it actually goes to nothing. Because how you would stop the bike from running is to kill power by turning your key off to this, to this black and red wire. If you were using this setup with the 5-pin AC setup, this black and white wire is actually your kill wire, which is a ground. And as soon as you ground this out, it kills the bike, because that's where you're getting your power, is from the bike, not from 12 volts. So you need to ground it out. Ground out the power that is being given to this black and red wire. So normally, like on this bike, on the Rebel, it actually has a power wire, a black and red power wire, and that's the beauty of Hondas, man, is that they keep their wire colors pretty simple all the way through the late, all the way through the late 70s, all the way through the mid 90s. They keep their wire colors pretty much the same. Now, this setup doesn't only work for Hondas, it works for Kawasaki's and Yamahas and Suzuki's, and all you need to know is which wire's my signal wire for my pulse generator, which wire's my power wire, which wire is going to be my my coil wire, and of course, if it's an AC system, which one's my kill, and then of course always ground. Once you have that, this will fire just about anything with a pulse generator. Now the only difference is, and when you start talking about real performance and stuff, is that a lot of these have a different advance curve built into them. And the bike, the bike is going to run, and it's going to run pretty well. But I mean, if you're talking about, like in super performance and drag racing type of scenario, you know what I mean? It may not be the exact curve for that bike, but in a pinch, some of these CDIs for some of these bikes, especially the factory stuff, is crazy expensive, and sometimes hard to find. If you keep a DC one with this plug around, or even an extra AC one with the plug around, and you've got a bike that you're trying to diagnose, and you come across the fact that, hey, my stator looks good, my pulse generator looks good, my coils are good, my spark plugs are good, I got fuel, I got compression, this dang thing just will not fire. Well, if you have this little setup around, you can just plug this in and boom, boom, see if it'll run, you know, see if you'll get some spark out of it. And if you get spark out of it with hooking this up, then you know that for number one, you know that the bike will run and get spark. You know that your pulse generator is fine. On a DC setup, you still aren't 100% sure if it's your stator or not, because you're using 12 volts. You're not using the stator. But if you keep one of the AC versions around too and hook it up normally, you'll know that my stator's good, my pulse generator's good, my coils are good, spark plugs are good, wires are good, everything's good. Now, the problem is the CDI that you have, you know. And we'll bring you back over. Right now on the bike, I have got the right AC 6-pin CDI hooked up to it, and we'll show you that it runs on the AC version, and then I'll hook this up real quick on this DC version and just show you how easy it is to do. And it's just a great little thing. When you're talking about, this is like 10 bucks on Amazon, you know, 10, 15 bucks. It's just a great little thing to have in your shop if you're working on bikes, or just have around in a pinch. That if one of your bikes dies, you can graft this thing in there and have your bike up and running. So we'll bring you over here, and that's helped me diagnose too, because they helped me diagnose that stator, because I couldn't get the bike to fire on the stator, and I stuck another AC CDI, because I was like, okay, maybe it's a CDI. Stuck it on there, still wouldn't run. So I was like, crap. So then I went and got my DC CDI set up, stuck it on there, bike fired right up. That tells me that it's not my pulse generator, it wasn't my CDI, wasn't my coils, wasn't my spark plugs, wasn't fuel, wasn't anything else. It was the stator, because the stator is the only thing that's giving you, the only thing stopping you at that point. You know, and of course it also tells you that you've got a good ground. Now right now it's kind of cobbed together because I haven't fully built the wiring harness for this bike yet. I'm just trying to get it kind of just proof of that it runs, you know. But we'll get over there, take a look. Well, so that's really it, guys. Like I said, it's really simple. It's going to help out a lot. Get you by in a pinch, get your bike going for the weekend. If it all of a sudden dies and you want to go riding with your buddies or whatever, or if you, like I said, you got to get to work or whatever, it will help you out. So anyways, you know, if you like this video and it helps you out and that kind of thing, you know, like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and we'll see you on the next one.